How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to the Dragon's Den. It's been a little bit, but we got a quick one here today. So we're going to try and get through this real quick. It's going to be another deck tech. We're going to go over everything, but we may not spend as much time on stuff as we normally do because I don't have as much time to record today. It's been a little bit of a busy week, but we're going to make the most of what we got. So here we go. Today we're going to go over Teysa Karlov, Orzhov Commander, 1 black, 1 white, 2 generic, 2/4. If a creature dying causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, that ability triggers an additional time. Creature tokens you control have Vigilance and Lifelink. So, this is all primarily built around that first ability right there, doubling up on our death triggers. The creature tokens having Vigilance and Lifelink, it can matter, but that's not what the deck is built around. There are some creature things that produce creature tokens in the deck, but that is not the primary focus of the deck. It's Aristocrats. It's built all around those death triggers. So let's get into this. For our ramp, we got Soul Ring, Arcane Signet, Orzhov Signet, Talisman of Hierarchy, Mind Stone, Thought Vessel, and Cryptghast. Cryptghast making all of your swamps tap for an additional black. And it has Extort, which is good, so you can cast spells, and if you're going to have the extra mana, you can pay the one to gain some life and make your opponents lose some, kind of feeding into your strategy. So, there's not as much ramp in this deck as I would put in most decks, but you don't need it because the average mana cost of this deck is actually pretty low, with a lot of your spells being 2 and 3 drops in that range. So, let's just start getting into the cards in the deck and what it really wants to do. Blood Artist, causing a target opponent to lose 1 and you gain 1 every time a creature dies. Now that's going to happen twice. Cruel Celebrant, doing the same thing except it's each opponent loses 1 and you gain 1. Now that's going to happen twice. Zulaport Cutthroat, same thing as Cruel Celebrant. Everybody loses 1, you gain 1. This is one of the newer cards, so we'll spend a little bit more time on this. I'm sorry that it's kind of facing the way that it is. It's kind of, awkward because it's a doubled up card like this. So you got Funeral Room, which is whenever a creature you control dies, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. So it does the same thing that like Zulaport Cutthroat, Cruel Celebrant, and whatnot do. And you can cast that for 3 at the beginning of the game, which is an enchantment, and then Awakening Hall will be locked, if that's how you do it. You can actually unlock Awakening Hall first, and then unlock Funeral Room later, if that's what you want to do. But what Awakening Hall does, is you can pay 2 black and 6 generic later to unlock that door. When you unlock this door, return all creature cards from your graveyard to the battlefield, so it's a mass recursion spell. So, that's really, really good, especially since you're going to be sacrificing things to get value a lot in this deck. We got Pitiless Plunderer that makes treasures whenever your creatures die. Bastion of Remembrance, another card that says your opponents lose life and you gain life when your creatures die, but this also gives you a 1/1 soldier creature token whenever it enters. So it gives you some sacrifice fodder to go along with casting this. Pawn of Ulamog, whenever it or another non-token creature you control dies, you make a 0/1 Eldrazi spawn that you can sacrifice to make a generic mana. Ellis Ilkor serves 2 purposes. It's going to gain you life whenever creatures enter the battlefield under your control, and your opponents are going to lose life when your creatures die. So it doubles up. It's going to gain you some life and make your opponents lose life. Alinda the Dusk Rose. Alinda is in here because since you're going to be sacrificing so many creatures and things are going to be dying the way they are and everything else, now every time you sacrifice a creature, you're going to be putting 2 1/1 counters on Alinda. And then when Alinda eventually dies, you are going to make a bunch of 1/1 vampire creature tokens. So there is a world out there where you cast this, sacrifice a bunch of creatures, put a bunch of 1/1 counters on Alinda, and then sacrifice her to make a bunch more tokens, then sacrifice all those tokens and kind of snowball to deal a massive amount of damage in 1 turn. Drivnod Carnage Dominus. This also, if a creature dying causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, that ability triggers an additional time. It does the same thing that your commander does. So it's some redundancy. So if you have this and your commander out, you'll get 3 instances on death triggers rather than just 1. So also really, really good. And then if you want to pay the 4 life to keep this around, or 2 black mana and exile 3 creature cards from your graveyard, you can give Drivnod, you can put an indestructible counter on Drivnod. So it's redundant to what your commander does, which you want some redundancy in your deck, and it's something that can protect itself. Moving on, we got Doomed Traveler, which is a 1-mana 1/1 that gives you a 1/1 when it dies. So if your commander's out, you can sacrifice this and get 2 creatures for sacrificing this one, which means under the right circumstances, if you have your commander out and you're like, okay, I have like an Ashnod's Altar out, which is in this deck, and we'll get to it. It's like, okay, I'm going to sacrifice this to make 2 mana, make 2 more 1/1s, and sack those 1/1s as well, and I'm going to make a total of 6 mana later on in the game, because this is going to give me more things to sacrifice. So we're going to have some more cards in here that do stuff like this, where they make creature tokens when they die, so that you can turn around and then sack those creature tokens to get more value out of them, because that's all you want to be doing, is you want to be rotating through your creatures, sacrificing as much stuff as you can to just drain your opponents out of life. So we have Indebted Spirit, which does the same thing. It has Bestow, and it has Afterlife 1, and if you bestow it, the enchanted creature gets +1/+1 and Afterlife 1. Afterlife 1 means you're going to create a 1/1 white and black spirit creature token with flying when this dies. So it's sort of the same thing as the last one. You sacrifice it to get value, to then get 2 more creatures to sacrifice for value. Reassembling Skeleton. Under the right circumstances, with the right board, this can be a combo piece with something like Pitiless Plunderer out and a Sacrifice Outlet. This goes infinite, because you would sacrifice this to your sack outlet, Pitiless Plunderer will trigger, you'll make 2 treasure tokens, and then you sacrifice the 2 treasures to bring back Reassembling Skeleton. This gives you an infinite sacrifice outlet. So you'll do whatever you're sacrificing it to an infinite number of times. So whether that be scry or make mana or whatever, and just keep bringing it back. So even if it's scry, though, something where you're not getting a lot of active value outside of just choosing what you're going to draw next, with something like your Blood Artist or something like that out, the infinite sacrifice loop enough on its own is enough to win the game. So this can be a combo piece, and at worst, it's a piece of reusable sack, like sack fodder. Grim Horror specs: whenever another non-token creature you control dies, draw a card. And it has Morph. I don't know if that'll matter most of the time, but so creatures dying causes you to draw cards. Now you're going to draw multiple cards. Ministrant of Obligation, kind of the same thing. It's got Afterlife 2, so you'll sacrifice this and you'll actually make 4 creature tokens for the death triggers with your commander. Skull Clamp. A lot of the creatures in this deck have 1 toughness. Basically all the creature tokens, with the exception of just a few, have 1 toughness. So now you can equip Skull Clamp and draw 4 cards for 1 mana. On top of that, so that's just another way to cycle through your creatures for absolutely insane value. Viscera is a sack outlet that allows you to scry. Woe Strider is another sack outlet that allows you to scry, but it'll also make you a 0/1 goat when it enters, and you can escape it if need be. So if it's in your graveyard and you need it back later, you can absolutely do that. Ashnod's Altar is another sack outlet that's an artifact that lets you sacrifice a creature to make 2 generic mana. Nim Deathmantle is, I believe it's part of a combo in this deck. So equipped creature gets +2/+2 and has Intimidate and is a black zombie. And then whenever a non-token creature is put into your graveyard from the battlefield, you may pay 4. If you do, return that card to the battlefield and attach Nim Deathmantle to it. So this goes infinite with something like, this goes infinite with the next card, Grave Titan, and Ashnod's Altar. So you play Grave Titan and you'll get 2 zombies. You sacrifice a zombie and a Grave Titan to the Ashnod's Altar to make 4 mana. You use the 4 mana to pay into Nim Deathmantle to bring Grave Titan back and make 2 more zombies. This will effectively, if you cycle it through, you can make infinite zombies and infinite colored mana, as well as having infinite death triggers. So this is another infinite combo that's in this deck. Next we have Grey Merchant of Asphodel. This is something that, say you have your Grave Titan combo out. You make all this mana, you're infinite on board, you have all these infinite zombies, but you don't have a way to win on the spot. Grey Merchant could be something that does that. If you don't have any of your Blood Artist stuff or any of that out, you can then start sacrificing your Grey Merchant and use your infinite colorless mana to keep flickering Grey Merchant and drain your opponents out that way. Grey Merchant is just a really good card in general to have in a deck where a lot of your permanents are going to have black mana in them. Kokoshu, the Evening Star. Whenever you sacrifice Kokoshu, or whenever Kokoshu dies, each opponent's going to lose 5 life, and you're going to gain life equal to the life lost this way. This is another thing that if you recur it over and over again, or you find a way to slip it into one of your combos or something like that, you drain all of your opponents out, and it just helps you win the game. And even at a normal 4-person pod, being able to play this and then sacrifice it to make all of your opponents lose 5 and you gain 15, especially if you have something out like a veto or a sanguine bond, can be a humongous swing in life where you're essentially hitting everybody for 20 life and you're gaining 15. War and Soul Trader is a sacrifice outlet that causes you to lose 1 life and create a treasure token. Sacrificing creatures to make mana in any shape, form, or fashion is extremely good. So War and Soul Trader is almost a must include in here. Liliana Dreadhorde General, this is in here for several reasons. It's a planeswalker, so it's a little bit harder to interact with. Whenever a creature you control dies, you draw a card, so now you're drawing 2 cards. It'll allow you to plus it to make a zombie that you can then use to sacrifice for value and draw cards. You can -4 to make each player sacrifice 2 creatures, and basically what this is going to do with your commander out, if you do that -4, each of your opponents are going to lose 2 creatures. You're also going to sacrifice 2 creatures, and at a minimum, you're drawing 4 cards, assuming you have none of your other aristocrats pieces out. So see, that's the thing. A lot of these cards on their own are extremely good on their own, but then whenever you start realizing, it's like, okay, this will ping somebody for 1 and I'll gain a life, or with my commander out, everybody will lose 2 and I'll gain 2, but then you realize, oh, well, I have 4 or 5 of these pieces out, now I'm going to sacrifice 1 creature, and all of a sudden everybody is losing like 6, I'm gaining 6, and I'm also drawing 4 cards, and then how it died is because I sacrificed it and I made some extra mana, or I scryed or something. So all these pieces come together and they sort of stack on top of each other, and it gives you absolutely insane value. Lurrus of the Dream Den is in here. It's a 3-mana 3/2. This can't be used as your companion because there are higher mana cost cards in here. However, with so much of your deck being mana value 2 or less, think like your Blood Artist, Cruel Celebrant, things like that, there's a lot of things you can be like, okay, hey, I have this 1-mana creature out, so, and it's one of the ones with Afterlife. So I'm going to sacrifice this 1-mana 1/1 that has Afterlife and make some mana, make 2 more things, then use the mana that I got from sacrificing it to recast it and sacrifice it again, and it really kind of just helps you keep your combos going. Sun Titan is another piece of recursion that's going to get back anything with 3 or less every time it enters, or whenever you attack with it. So being able to recur some of your pieces like that, like I said, any sort of things that recur small pieces, considering so much of your combos and your things that matter are small pieces, having that recursion is extremely good. Revelark is part of a combo, but it's also good on its own. So whenever Revelark leaves the battlefield, return up to 2 target creatures with power 2 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. So this can be good because you can sacrifice it and, play it, sacrifice it, get a couple of things back to recur some stuff and everything else. That ain't bad. But the reason this is in here is because it goes infinite with Karmic Guide. So if you have Revelark and Karmic Guide, you go infinite sacrifice. So Karmic Guide says when Karmic Guide enters the battlefield, return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. Revelark says whenever it dies, you return target creature card with power 2 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. So you play Revelark. If Revelark is in your graveyard, I don't think it really matters which one you play first. I could be wrong. So if you... Okay, yeah, so you have to have Revelark in your graveyard first. So you have Revelark in your graveyard, whether you play it to get something back or whatever. Have Revelark in your graveyard. Play Karmic Guide. Karmic Guide gets the Revelark back. You sacrifice the Karmic Guide, then you sacrifice the Revelark. When the Revelark dies, you bring back the Karmic Guide and bring back the Revelark. So if you end up having both of them on the field at the same time, it'll still work as long as you have a sack outlet. So yeah, I guess it really doesn't matter which one you sacrifice first or which one you play first. As long as both of them end up on the field at the same time with any sacrifice outlet, you have infinite sacrifice. Hallowed Spirit Keeper. When it dies, you create X11 white spirit creature tokens with flying, where X is the number of creature cards in your graveyard. Chances are you're going to have a bunch of creatures in your graveyard, so you can sacrifice this thing to make a ton of 1/1s that you can then continue to sacrifice. Marionette Master has Fabricate 3. I'm going to say this, in most cases, you'll want to put the 3/1/1 counters on rather than make the 3/1/1s. But, either way is absolutely perfectly fine and very good. Whenever an artifact you control is put into the graveyard from the battlefield, target opponent loses life equal to Marionette Master's power. So, actually, I didn't completely think this one through. So, I was thinking more along the lines of Marionette Apprentice. So, you actually may not want to run Marionette Master in the deck at all. Then again, it can be okay, but I think I kind of screwed the pooch here. I'm not going to lie. Reading the card explains the card, and I did not read the card all the way through. So I guess if you did want to run Marionette Master, you could, to make 3/1/1s to be able to sacrifice. And then whenever you sacrifice those 3/1/1s, because they are artifacts, people can lose life. So I guess you can play this and then sacrifice that. It's not the worst thing in the world to have in here, but it's definitely not as good as I thought it was. So this one's on me, and this is something that I could definitely see you wanting to change, and I don't blame you at all. So I'm going to take full credit for that one, and I screwed that up. Next we have Marionette Apprentice, which is a good card to run in this deck. So it has Fabricate 1, and then whenever another creature or artifact you control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, each opponent loses 1 life. So this does count creatures. So this made me think that Marionette Master had also said creatures, but Marionette Master does not say creatures. It just says artifacts. Marionette Apprentice is artifacts or creatures, so it does both. So it's actually good. Run this card. Sad Robot. Sad Robot over the years has kind of fallen out of favor because it's a little bit slower compared to the format now. But the way I see it is it's a 4-mana that 2/2 that's going to get you a land. It's going to ramp you when it enters. Then worst case scenario, you sacrifice it and draw 2 cards. So it's a piece of, that being able to draw that additional card when it dies because of your commander, I think makes it worth running. Orzhov Enforcer, it's it has Afterlife 1, so it's the same thing as all the other Afterlife cards. It's in here because you can sacrifice it and then get more things to sacrifice. Hunted Witness, it's Afterlife without being Afterlife because it doesn't make spirits, but you sacrifice it and you get creature tokens to then sacrifice. Sifter of Skulls, whenever another non-token creature you control dies, put a 1/1 colorless Eldrazi Scion creature token onto the battlefield. It has sacrifice this creature, add colorless to your mana pool. So since you're going to be sacrificing a bunch of creatures and things like that, this effectively ramps you on top of giving you more creatures to sacrifice. Falkenrath Noble, it's another Aristocrats piece. It says whenever it dies or another creature dies, target player loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. It's basically it's a bigger Blood Artist because it has flying and it's a 2/2 instead of a 0/1. Ophiomancer, which is a 3-mana 2/2 at the beginning of each upkeep. If you control no snakes, create a 1/1 black snake creature token. How you would want to play this is, say you have something like your Viscera Seer out, or even your Ashnod's Altar, even if you're not going to get any more value out of it than playing this. But you have a couple of your Aristocrats pieces out, and you're like, oh, hey, at the beginning of your upkeep, I control no snakes, so I'm going to make a snake. Well, before you end your turn, I'm going to sacrifice this snake, and I'm either going to make some mana, or I'm going to scry. This works best with the scry or the treasure creators out. Okay, so I'm going to sacrifice this snake, get some value out of it, and then, well, everybody's going to lose some life, and I'm going to gain some life, and then go to the next person's upkeep, and it's like, oh, I don't control any snakes, so I'm going to make another snake. So you're going to make and sacrifice a snake on every upkeep. It's extremely efficient. Ogre Slumlord, whenever another non-token creature dies, you may put a 1/1 black rat creature token onto the battlefield. This is another thing that's going to allow you to sacrifice creatures and then make more creatures to sacrifice. So it's really good just because of that. Corpse Knight, whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, each opponent loses 1 life. This is something that gives you benefits for creatures entering, but then a lot of the cards we have in here create creature tokens when they die, so you're going to have a lot of creatures entering the battlefield, so having your opponents lose life when your creatures enter and when they die is extremely good. Now, something you want to do in here is there's quite a lot of board wipes in this deck. So something you want to do is you want to absolutely flood your board with creatures, a bunch of creature tokens, a bunch of creatures, a bunch of your Aristocrats pieces, and then you just wipe the board. You know, and you just want to keep wiping the board over and over and over again when you have a bunch of stuff out, hitting opponents for a bunch of life and things like that. And that's a way this deck can function outside of trying to cycle through things in combo. So we got Wrath of God, we've got Damnation, we've got Day of Judgment, Fumigate, gaining you life and destroying all creatures, Austere Command, because it's extremely versatile and can hit artifacts, enchantments, big creatures, and little creatures, and it can do any combination of these that you need. We have Ink Shield. Ink Shield is a really good gotcha card. So if you got somebody like you know is playing green, and you know they've got a Craterhoof Behemoth in their deck, and you know they've got this really big board out and everything else, if they do that and then they swing at you and you play Ink Shield, you are going to make a ton of tokens. And you could honestly, if somebody's swinging enough damage at you and then you play Ink Shield with the right board, you could just outright win out of nowhere on somebody else's turn. Ink Shield is an instant must include, in my opinion. Massacre Girl is going to be a board wipe in 99 out of 100 times, you know, because a lot of your creatures have 1 toughness. So it's another board wipe to have in the deck. Saw in Half is extremely fun, because you can take one of your best pieces, say like your Blood Artist, cast Saw in Half on your Blood Artist, get a death trigger, and then get 2 Blood Artists, or something along those lines. So that's extremely good. Kaya's Wrath is another board wipe, and then you gain life equal to the number of creatures that you controlled that were destroyed this way. So it's going to destroy everything and gain you a bunch of life. Now we want some mass recursion as well, because with us sacrificing things the way that we are and everything else, our board is going to be emptied several times. So with things like Living Death, you can say, okay, I'm going to sacrifice everything on my board, or I'm going to board wipe, and I'm going to get all this value, and then I'm going to play this. And with this particular card, everybody gets everything back, but you're like, okay, then I'm going to completely refill my board and do it all again, or something like that. So we have Command the Dread Horde, which Command the Dread Horde can also be used to get everything out of your graveyard back, but you're going to lose a lot of life in the process. But what this deck does, like half of the point of this deck is gaining life, and with most of your creatures being extremely small in mana value, then you'll be able to afford to get everything back out. Rise of the Dark Realms, return everything from every graveyard to the battlefield under your control. Extremely good. Moving on, we have White Sun's Twilight, which is X and 2 white. You gain X life, so life gain. Create X 1/1 colorless Phyrexian Might artifact creature tokens with Toxic 1, and this creature can't block. If X is 5 or more, destroy all other creatures. So this can be a board wipe that leaves you with things to sacrifice to help you rebuild, or if you've just got a ton of mana to dump into this thing, which you very well might, you can make a bunch of 1/1s with Toxic and actually have enough creatures to swing out and kill people that way. Martial Coup, which is a singular X and 2 white. Create X 1/1 white soldier creature tokens. If X is 5 or more, destroy all other creatures. Basically the same thing, except you're getting 1/1 soldiers instead of 1/1 mites with Toxic. Next we have Debt to the Deathless. Each opponent loses 2 times X life. You gain life equal to the life lost this way. For being 4 mana and a singular X in a deck where you can run something like Ashnod's Altar, or have like Pitiless Plunder and Worn Soul Trader out or something like that, and you can sacrifice and just make a ton of treasures or colorless mana or whatever, this can be a game finisher, and at worst is going to heavily sway the game into your favor. Next we have Exsanguinate. Each opponent loses X life. You gain life equal to the life lost this way. So Debt to the Deathless is they lose 2 times X life. This is a singular X life, and same thing, you dump a bunch of mana into this, it can absolutely finish the game or completely sway the game. Then we have Dusk and Dawn, or Dusk till Dawn, however you want to play it. If you play the Dusk part of this card, destroy all creatures with power 3 or greater. There's maybe 2 or 3 creatures in this deck that'll ever have power 2 or 3 or greater, so this can be a one-sided board wipe in that sense. And then you can cast Dawn, which is the Aftermath part, which is you can cast this only from your graveyard, then exile it. Return all creature cards with power 2 or less from your graveyard to your hand. So this can be a way for you to get all of your creatures back and kind of keep your strategy going after you've wiped the board. And then we have Ascend from Avernus, which is the last card in this deck, which is a singular X and 3 white, return all creature and planeswalker cards with mana value X or less from your graveyard to the battlefield, exile a sin from Avernus. So it's another way to completely put your board back into play. So that's how I would build this deck already. It's really built around the aristocrats thing. It's something that can definitely go infinite. There's definitely a way to make this deck better. Like, this is not going to be the most powerful version of this deck, but it's not meant to be. So this is meant to be. I don't know that I'm going to use the bracket system ever, this new bracket system that they have, at least until they start coming out with some more official stuff for it, because it's so subjective and so hard to kind of figure out and everything else, and they haven't done it. And I don't think the brackets are anywhere near as good as the regular system. Again, this is meant to be a very strong, consistent deck, probably around a 6 or a 7. So a good, strong deck for a casual table. Because there are some other cards in here, like if you wanted to put in Veto, Sanguine Bond, Exquisite Blood, that would give you another combo, because Exquisite Blood can combo with either of those. And with the amount of life this deck can gain, Sanguine Bond and Veto, even on their own, without Exquisite Blood, makes this deck significantly stronger. Because, especially with Sanguine Bond, because, you know, you're going to be gaining so much life from sacrificing your creatures, you're just going to kill your opponents twice as fast as you already are. And obviously adding in things like Demonic Tutor, Enlightened Tutor, Vampiric Tutor, and cutting out maybe one of the little side strategies or something like, oh, I don't need this many wipes. You know, I'll cut a wipe. I'll cut one of my, you know, maybe one or two of my wipes and put in a Demonic and a Vampiric Tutor, because I'll be able to go get the other ones a little bit easier or something like that. You know, this deck can be made stronger. This is not meant to be the strongest version of this deck. Earlier I told y'all I screwed up with the Marionette Master. So if I was to take Marionette Master out of this deck and put any one card in, it would probably just be Sanguine Bond. And that would bring the power level of this deck up quite a bit, in my opinion. Just having the ability to say, hey, now every time I gain life, you're also going to lose life. So with something like Zulaport Cutthroat and Sanguine Bond out, and then I sacrifice something, it's like, okay, you're all going to lose 2, I'm going to gain 2, but then because I gain 2, you're all going to lose another 2. So everybody's losing 4 and you're gaining 2 in that situation. So, yeah, Sanguine Bond, Veto, if you want to find places for those are cards I definitely recommend putting in here. But with that being said, this is the deck. This is how I would build it for a normal, casual table. So, with that being said, I hope y'all enjoyed, and I'll catch you next time.